In the shadow of an unraveling world order, war whispered from every horizon. Oceans that once bore the calm rhythm of commerce now churned with unseen intentions. Nations had grown teeth, sharper, faster, more elusive than ever, and they gnashed at one another across contested waters. Treaties collapsed under the weight of nationalism. Alliances twisted into rivalries. And in that volatile silence before the storm, the Black Star was born. Commissioned in secrecy, Black Star was more than a warship. It was a calculated response to chaos. A vessel forged not just of titanium and tech, but of desperation. It did not simply sail, it prowled. Designed by a multinational consortium of engineers and strategic thinkers, the ship embodied a grim consensus. Peace, at this stage, was no longer a probable outcome. Only dominance could preserve survival. Admiral Isha Vora stood alone on the observation deck of the naval installation as Black Star's silhouette was eased from dry dock, its frame emerging from darkness like some ancient beast stirred awake. Her breath clouded in the cold air, yet her gaze remained unmoving. She had overseen the construction of many warships, but none like this. Black Star's hull absorbed light instead of reflecting it, and its structure was a paradox. Sleek yet formidable, graceful yet monstrous. Vora's record read, like a textbook on modern maritime warfare, decorated, deliberate, and exacting. She carried the burden of knowing that every weapon system she authorized would one day meet its mark. But this ship, this moment, felt different. Black Star did not ask for permission. It radiated intent. She could feel it under her boots even before the engines roared to life. "You're not afraid of it," a voice said behind her. She turned. Commander Elias Trenholm, the ship's newly appointed executive officer, approached with the quiet confidence of a man who had survived more battles than he could recount. He was tall, pale from too many months beneath fluorescent lights, his uniform spotless, his eyes restless. "I'm not sure fear applies here," she replied. "You don't fear a storm. You don't fear an earthquake. You prepare for it." Trenholm smirked faintly. "And hope you're not standing in the wrong place when it arrives." They watched together in silence as cranes and drones danced around the vessel, bringing it to full assembly. Deep within its belly, the core reactor was already alive, thrumming like a second heartbeat. From this moment forward, Black Star was no longer a prototype. It was active command. The crew arrived in staggered rotations, their files hand-selected, cross-examined, and vetted with exhausting precision. No one joined Black Star by accident. There was Lieutenant Ava Mireles, a former systems architect turned tactical officer, whose loyalty was rumored to lie more with algorithms and orders. There was Chief Gunnery Sergeant Nico Rain, whose personnel file had redacted pages, and who spoke only when his words were necessary. And there was Specialist Kaito Lin, a cybernetics analyst barely 30, recruited directly from a disbanded intelligence unit that officially never existed. Together, they formed an unlikely collective. Human minds trained to operate alongside and in some ways beneath Black Star's evolving artificial intelligence, codenamed Shade. It didn't speak like a voice assistant or respond to commands with programmed cheer. It listened, it suggested, and increasingly it learned. From the bridge, Mireles watched the storm front forming on the Atlantic radar. It was still hours away, but the ship's hull sensors were already reading shifts in barometric pressure. She adjusted the display, casting long shadows across the matte black interior of the command deck. Around her, the crew moved like clockwork, synchronized, rehearsed, each motion polished through relentless simulation. And yet, there was an edge to the air, the electric taste of something unrehearsed coming near. "Status," she called out. "Engines nominal. Reactor load at 68%. Lynn answered from the side console, fingers dancing across touchscreen panels. Shade is anticipating minor turbulence, rerouting internal ballast to counterwave systems. "Of course it is," Mireles muttered, half in awe, half in skepticism. She still didn't know what she resented more, that an AI could run a warship better than any human, or that it had never made a mistake. As the sun dipped below the ocean's reach, Black Star completed its first full system calibration, signaling readiness. The official mission orders were locked behind biometric encryption, accessible only once at sea. The crew didn't know where they were going or why. Only Admiral Vora and the brass above her did. But even they, watching from distant command rooms, couldn't quite predict what BLACKSTAR might do once released. Midnight fell. With a silent tremor, the engines engaged. The ship slid from harbor into open water, like a predator joining the hunt. Waves parted, then reformed behind it, erasing its trail. At its helm, Commander Trenholm gripped the rail, his expression unreadable. The weight of it all settled over him. Not just a mission, but the fact that history might begin again with the ship or end altogether. In the lower decks, far from the polished steel of the bridge, Gunnery Sergeant Rain oversaw weapons inspection. His eyes traced every bolt, every cable. He trusted steel, not software. While others revered Shade's foresight, Rain prepared for failure. That was his way. He believed that every war ended the same way, with one man outlasting another. All the algorithms in the world couldn't change that. As the storm approached, something stirred within BLACKSTAR systems, an uptick in signal parsing, a recalibration of sonar depth scans. Shade was listening, not to the ocean, but to something beneath it. Trenholm noticed the anomaly just before the alert triggered. Unidentified acoustic pattern, bearing 071. Depth, 110 meters, Lynn announced. Submarine? Mirelis asked. Not military. Too irregular. Organic, maybe seismic, but Shade is flagging it as anomalous. The bridge darkened slightly as external cameras adjusted for lightning flashes. A bolt cracked the sky, illuminating the horizon in bone-white brilliance. For a moment, the ocean seemed to ripple unnaturally. Route us around it, Trenholm ordered. We're not chasing ghosts tonight. But Shade did not reroute. It paused. Override, Mirelis said quickly. No. Trenholm held up a hand. Let it finish. Seconds passed. Then Shade blinked a green confirmation. Course adjusted. Detour initiated. Whatever it had sensed, it had cataloged, stored. The ship continued on its path, cutting through the black waters like a whisper. Behind it, the anomaly disappeared from the scans, but not from memory. In her quarters, Vora reviewed the intercepted transmissions again. Coded fragments from distant coasts, encrypted distress calls from vessels that had gone silent. Something had been happening in the deep, ships vanishing, convoys disrupted, sensor logs wiped clean, and always the same final message. A burst of static, followed by coordinates now marked red on every naval map. BLACKSTAR was heading toward them. She leaned back in her chair and whispered to no one, "Let's see what you are." And the ship, as if hearing her, surged forward into the dark. The ice broke under pressure before the sonar could register the crack. Somewhere beneath the glacial waters of the Arctic Circle, a tremor pulsed outward like a whispered warning. It reached BLACKSTAR sensors moments before the alert reached the bridge, but by then, the crew was already in motion. The ship had begun to think faster than the people commanding it. Commander Trenholm stepped forward from the command chair, his boots clicking sharply on the mat floor. His jaw tightened as the data scrolled in silent urgency across the forward displays. "Shade, confirm seismic source," he ordered. The AI responded with no sound, only a blink. Confirmation negative. Not natural. Not predictable. The disturbance came from movement, not collapse. Something was stirring beneath the surface. Lieutenant Mirelis frowned as she rechecked the environmental overlays. 3 merchant vessels went dark along this corridor last week. Satellite response showed only shadows in the ice fields. No heat signatures. No debris. Sabotage? Trenholm asked. Possibly. But this doesn't feel like piracy. This feels deliberate. Clean. The bridge was quiet except for the steady pulse of the central reactor's harmonic signature. BLACKSTAR maintained its heading, slicing through the cold like a black knife. The ship had received new orders before dawn, classified under echo-level clearance, directing it to investigate a series of signal blackouts along strategic maritime routes. No allies were to be informed. No assistance was authorized. Admiral Vora had reviewed the mission files alone. When she delivered her briefing to the senior staff, it had been blunt. "We are the warning," she had said. "Whatever did this, whoever, is testing the edges of the map. They want to know how far they can reach before we answer. BLACKSTAR is the answer. Now, deep in contested waters, that answer was being prepared. On Deck 4, Gunnery Sergeant Rain led a fire team through a live munitions check. Drones hovered in place, feeding diagnostics to Shade, while human eyes handled the tactile precision that machines still lacked. Rain preferred it this way. He didn't trust anything with a soul not forged intention. The others might rely on the AI's targeting predictions, but he had one rule: never fire what you can't verify. Lin sat alone in the data cradle, his fingers sifting through waves of corrupted telemetry recovered from a vanished survey drone. Each frame he analyzed made his stomach turn. It wasn't just interference. Something had scrubbed the feed as it was transmitting, an active, intelligent manipulation. And at the end of the recording, a single image, not a shape, not a vessel, a ripple in the ice, perfectly concentric, as though the ocean had inhaled and chosen not to exhale. "Something's down there," he whispered. He uploaded the analysis to Shade, watching as the AI digested it, then offered no comment, no opinion, just quiet processing. That, more than anything, unnerved him. Trenholm convened the senior officers by nightfall, the bridge lit only by dim status lights and stormwatch overlays. A weather front approached from the west, driving sheets of snow across the radar. Perfect cover or perfect trap. "We go dark," he announced. Full EM silence. No transmissions. No pings. No active scans. "And if we lose contact with Shade's uplink grid?" Mirelis asked. "Then we operate local only," he said. "The AI is to prioritize internal routing. We're on our own." The decision wasn't questioned, not by this crew. Each of them had been chosen for this exact moment, to be the knife edge in a war that hadn't yet been declared. At 0200 hours, BLACKSTAR entered the target zone. Beneath the surface, sonar pulses mapped the terrain like whispered fingertips across silk. No hostiles detected. No friendlies, either. Just the ice and the pressure silence. Then came the pulse. It wasn't loud. It didn't shake the ship. But everyone on the bridge felt it. A single, rhythmic thud through the hull. Once. Then again, like a heartbeat coming from below. "Shade is diverting sensor rays," Lin said, his voice suddenly dry. "Locking in on acoustic source. It's moving." "Define moving," Trenholm said. "Up." The water erupted. Something massive breached 200 meters off port bow, cloaked in mist and fragments of shattered ice. It wasn't visible, at least not in a recognizable form. But the impact wave hit BLACKSTAR seconds later, knocking the ship 15 degrees off axis. Warning klaxons triggered across multiple decks. Shade rerouted power instantly, stabilizing pitch and roll before the next wave struck. Mirelis shouted, activating countermeasures. But Shade was already ahead, releasing a curtain of decoy flares and sonar jammers into the frigid water. For a moment, the sea lit up like a dying star, shadows writhing within it. "Contact closing fast," Lin said, sweat beading on his temple. "Size estimate, unknown. Surface displacement exceeds all known subs. Weapons online. Rain confirmed from a lower console. No fire," Trenholm ordered. "Not until we're sure it's hostile." "It just hit us," Mirelis snapped. "And it could have sunk us if it wanted to," he countered. "Hold." The next moment stretched. On screen, the shadows receded. Whatever had risen from the deep, it wasn't chasing them. It had come up, looked, and gone back down. Trenholm exhaled. That wasn't attack. That was a message. Silence followed, but it was loaded, charged. No one knew how to interpret what they'd seen, or they'd seen anything at all. But Vora did. She had remained silent during the encounter, watching from her station with a calm that bordered on resignation. When she spoke, it was with a certainty that pierced through doubt. "They're probing us," she said. "Not just to see how we fight, but how we hesitate." Mirelis turned to her, unsettled. "You're saying this was a test?" Vora nodded. "And we passed. Barely." Shay began cataloging the encounter as a class-read anomaly, encrypting logs and cross-referencing deep-sea event patterns. The crew dispersed to stations, but tension remained, coiled around every system. The sea had gone still again. Later, in the officers' mess, Lynn sat across from Mireles, their trays untouched. "What do you think it was?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then finally, something that didn't expect to be seen. He leaned forward. "You think it's alien?" She gave him a look, half amusement, half weariness. "I think it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that Shade didn't predict it. That means our enemy knows how to be invisible, even to a machine built to see everything." Outside, the storm continued. BLACKSTAR resumed patrol on a new heading, the ice closing behind it like a wound healing without a scar. Far beneath the surface, where light had never reached, the thing that watched them did not blink. It waited, calculated, and slowly, very slowly, it moved again. Back on the bridge, Trenholm remained alone, eyes fixed on the forward viewport. There was nothing visible, just blackness, wind, and the occasional flicker of lightning over a dead sea. He spoke, not sure if to himself or to Shade. "They wanted us to know they're here." Shade didn't respond. But deep within the ship, its processors adjusted power flow, recalibrated long-range scans, and rerouted surveillance protocols without being asked. BLACKSTAR sailed forward, into a silence heavy with expectation. The silence after the encounter was heavier than any explosion. It wrapped the ship like fog, dense and unwilling to lift. BLACKSTAR's engines thrummed at a low pulse, steady, cautious, as if even the machine knew it had stepped too close to something vast and awake. In the days following the breach, the crew moved differently. There were fewer jokes on the lower decks, fewer casual conversations in the mess. Lynn stopped sleeping altogether, running simulations based on a brief encounter, desperate to extract some predictive model. Every pass he made to the corrupted sonar data only revealed one truth. Whatever was down there didn't care that it had been seen. It had allowed it. On the command deck, Commander Trenholm reviewed the ship's encrypted logs, pausing again and again at the moment the anomaly broke the surface. There was no physical image, only light distortion and water displacement, yet the AI labeled it with unusual certainty. Non-terrestrial dynamics. Probable. Shade never made guesses. But this, apparently, didn't require one. Admiral Vora remained unreadable. She had spent most of her time isolated in the tactical core, an inner sanctum few dared to approach without summons. Rumors circulated that she was receiving off-grid directives, untraceable signals Shade refused to log. Some whisper about red code protocols, the kind that got entire fleets reassigned or disappeared. The truth was simpler. Vora knew what they had encountered, or at least she had long suspected something like it existed. Her time in Deep Command had exposed her classified archives, reports dismissed as anomalies or mass psychosis. Fishing trawlers finding dead oceans, entire island outposts going silent, seismic readings that formed symmetrical patterns when plotted over time. It had a logic, a rhythm. Now it had a face, or at least a shadow, and Vora would not wait for it to surface again on its terms. She summoned Trenholm and Mireles to the core late on the third night. The room, housed near the AI's primary neural matrix, was soundproofed, shielded, and dark. The only light came from the transparent data columns, spiraling upward like frozen lightning. "I've made contact," Vora said without preamble. Mireles tensed. "With who?" "Not a who," Vora replied. "A what, or maybe a where, a point of origin." Trenholm narrowed his eyes. "You think it's a base?" "Not in the way we define one," she said. "More like a fracture, a deep rift below the continental shelf. Shade mapped it partially when we rerouted sonar arrays, buried under 10 kilometers of water and ice. But it's not natural. The mineral composition down there doesn't match the surrounding crust. And something down there is absorbing active scans." Mireles stepped closer to the central interface. "You want to go there?" "I want to send something in first," Vora said. "Something small, fast, unmanned." Trenholm nodded. "The Echo drone." Vora tapped her wrist console. "Already prepped. Shade has outfitted it with biofeedback sensors, deep current stabilizers, and redundant transmission systems. It will go silent past the 5-kilometer mark. If it comes back online, we'll know more. And if it doesn't? Mirelis asked. Vora met her eyes. Then we go in blind. The Echo drone launched before dawn. It sliced through the water with mechanical elegance, its titanium hull groaning slightly under increasing pressure. The ship followed from a distance, keeping minimal thrust to maintain stealth. On screen, the telemetry data scrolled in real time. Temperature drops, pressure spikes, magnetic interference. At 4,600 meters, the first anomaly appeared, a field of bioluminescent structures clustered along the ocean floor. Not coral, not anything documented. The lights pulse in slow, deliberate patterns. Shade labeled the zone, sentience, possible. Communication attempt, undetermined. At 5,000 meters, the drone's visual feed turned white, then black, then ceased. All sensors failed simultaneously. Shade attempted the recovery protocol. It failed. Lynn stared at the frozen screen. It didn't just stop transmitting, he whispered. It was shut down. Clean. Precise. As if someone flipped a switch. The crew waited. 30 minutes. Then 60. No return ping. No drift signal. It was gone. Vora ordered the drone's last ping triangulated. The coordinates formed a near-perfect circle on the map, a crater-like depression in the ocean floor. One Shade had not been able to detect until now, a void darker than its surroundings, absorbing sonar, light, even heat. Trenholm leaned forward. A gate. Vora nodded slowly. Or a throat. 2 hours later, BLACKSTAR began its descent. Not a dive. This ship wasn't made for such depths. But proximity sweep, accompanied by a smaller subvessel. The Harrow, piloted by Mirelis and 2 specialists. Lynn insisted on joining, despite protocol. He carried with him an experimental data prism, developed with Shade's partial input. It wasn't just for recording. It was designed to interpret and reflect unknown frequencies, an attempt to listen in a language not yet learned. The Harrow detached silently and began its slow journey into the trench. Inside, time moved differently. The pressure was constant, but psychological more than mechanical. Visibility dropped to mere meters. The walls of the trench seemed to shift, as if reacting to their presence. Bioluminescent strands floated lazily, retreating as the submersible neared. At 4,800 meters, they saw it. Not a structure, not a creature. A field, a dome of some kind, faintly shimmering. Not solid, not liquid. Lynn activated the data prism. It pulsed once, then again, then began to glow. Something's talking, he said, but it wasn't noise. It was rhythm, pattern, like language, if language were a sensation rather than sound. Mirelis reached out, instinctively touching the glass. For a moment, her mind filled with fragments, not memories, not thoughts. Something older. Images of spiraling galaxies, vast oceans under black suns, and the taste of static on her tongue. Then the dome pulsed, and the Harrow lost power. The lights went out. Instruments died. Even the emergency backups failed. Only the prism continued to glow, steady, calm, almost patient. Then Shade's voice, faint and distorted, cut through the comms. This is not absence. This is invitation. The Harrow began to rise on its own, slowly, effortlessly, as if lifted. On board BLACKSTAR, alarms triggered as the sub reappeared on sonar, accelerating far faster than was safe. It breached the surface with a roar, trailing phosphorescent water. Crew rushed to recover it. Inside, the 3 passengers were conscious, but altered. Lynn stared into nothing, whispering sequences of numbers that formed no discernible pattern. One of the specialists wept silently, unable to articulate why. Mirelis sat still, eyes closed, her pulse perfectly steady. She opened them slowly as Vora stepped into the medbay. "It knows we're here," she said. "And what did it say?" the Admiral asked. Mirelis looked past her. It said we're late. Far below, in the trench that was not a trench, the shimmer faded. The gate had opened, and it was still open. The days that followed passed in a kind of suspended dread. The air aboard BLACKSTAR charged with expectation and unease. Every system operated at full function, but the ship itself felt hushed, as if even the steel could sense the turning of something vast beneath it. The crew worked with precision, but spoke less. Even the AI shade issued fewer vocal notifications, responding only when directly engaged, its tone stripped of inflection. Commander Trenholm stood alone in the observation alcove, eyes fixed on the vast stretch of sea. No land in sight, no birds, no sound, only the endless, glistening cold. He watched as the horizon bent faintly under its own pressure, and for a moment he imagined the ocean exhaling again, slow, deliberate, and full of judgment. Behind him, Admiral Vora entered silently. She hadn't slept in 40 hours, but her bearing remained composed, unbroken by exhaustion. "They're watching us," Trenholm said without turning. He faced her then. "We provoked something, Admiral. Whatever that dome was, it was aware. That was not a scan. That was initiation." Vora nodded. "And we responded, which means escalation is inevitable." She handed him a data slate. The encrypted orders had come moments before to the classified relay, buried within a burst transmission masked as deep-sea atmospheric noise. There was no signature, no acknowledgement from command, just a directive. Engage Operation Umbral Light. Deploy Level 5 incursion protocols. Authorize Shade autonomous response if all human command nodes are compromised. Trenholm read it twice, then handed it back. No recall option. "Nope," Vora said. "We're no longer observers." Below, in the medbay, Mireles had been discharged earlier that morning. Physically, she was stable, more than stable, in fact. Her vitals had shown elevated neural activity across all hemispheres of the brain, an impossible level of cognitive coordination. She remembered everything she'd seen in the Harrow, the fractal pulses of light, the strange clarity that had filled her, the overwhelming impression of time, nonlinear, circular, folding it on itself like an origami of cause and consequence. She found Lin in the drone lab, surrounded by shattered remnants of the data prism. He hadn't spoken since returning, but he worked, constantly, as if driven by an outside rhythm. "You're reconstructing it?" she asked. He didn't look up. "No, it's reconstructing itself." She stared. "What?" He pointed. In the center of the shattered fragments, fine threads of iridescent material were weaving themselves together. Not machinery, not nanotech. Something stranger, organic, recursive, self-correcting. "It's learning us," Lin said, voice flat. "Not just language. Shape, intention, memory." She reached toward the prism. "Will it speak again?" "I think," he whispered. "It never stopped." In the command center, Shade initiated a Level 5 pre-combat assessment without being prompted. It displayed scenarios across a dozen alternate timelines, some lasting seconds, some stretching into theoretical years. Each ended with the same signature, black convergence event. In every iteration, the point of divergence was identical. First contact at depth. The AI registered a 92.4% probability that humanity had already entered a conflict. It just hadn't begun firing yet. Admiral Vora convened a full senior staff assembly, an unprecedented event aboard BLACKSTAR, without a direct threat in visual range. The crew gathered in the atrium, the ship's largest space not dedicated to operations. No speeches, no ceremony. Vora's voice carried clear, deliberate weight. "We are no longer chasing shadows. What we encounter beneath the trench is not a weapon. It is a vector, a messenger, and perhaps a prison. Or something worse, a lure." A silent murmur passed through the room. She continued, "There will be no retreat. There is no safe harbor. What woke in that place has begun to ripple outward. Patterns are emerging. Deep sea tremors in synchronized intervals, communication satellites encountering signal corruption at predictable latencies and across multiple navies, vessels reporting temporal distortion near major trenches." Mireles stepped forward. "They are not attacking us. They are testing the membrane, seeing if we're ready." "Ready for what?" someone called. Lin spoke for the first time in public since the Harrow's return. "For dialogue. Or conquest? Possibly both. I don't think they draw the distinction. The silence afterward was broken only by the pulse of the ship's reactor. Shade interrupted with a soft chime. Incoming signal. Unknown origin. Broad spectrum encoding. Suggests immediate analysis. The bridge snapped into motion. The message came through as sound, not language. A low harmonic pulse, deep enough to vibrate teeth. Overlaid atop it were patterns that appeared random but, when visualized, resolved into geometric spirals, recursive, evolving. "It's a key," Lynn whispered. "It's unlocking something." Shade confirmed the transmission was not targeting them, but rather the trench. A call, and something, somewhere in the dark, responded. The trench lit up again, not visually, but on sensors. Energy rose from its depths, consistent with the same signature recorded during the Echo drone's disappearance. But this time it didn't vanish. It held steady. "Gates opening," Trenholm said. "Negative," Shade corrected. "It's not opening. It's stabilizing." Within minutes, the entire area around BLACKSTAR became magnetically active. Currents shifted. Ice flows splintered. Deep ocean pressure waves began radiating outward in symmetrical bursts. "It's forming a corridor," Mirella said. "An invitation to enter." Vora made the call. "We go." With full AI backup, incursion shielding, and full system isolation protocols. Shade goes in with us. Trenholm hesitated. "You trust it?" "I trust that it's curious," she said. "And that may be the only shared trait we have with what lies beneath." Preparations were swift. The Harrow was reconfigured, this time tethered to BLACKSTAR via a quantum filament connection. Mirelis and Lynn boarded again, this time with Shade embedded directly into their systems, its core shunted through a mobile neural relay. As the sub descended, everything grew still above. BLACKSTAR held its position like a guardian, engines pulsing with restrained tension. Then the Harrow reached the gate. This time it didn't breach them. It accepted them. The shimmer parted like light through water, and they crossed into a void that should not have existed. A space beneath the sea, yet untouched by its pressure. Inside, geometry shifted. Angles formed that bent inward. Structures floated, tethered to nothing. Shapes impossible to hold in a single gaze. The walls weren't made of matter, but of memory. Lynn saw his mother. Mirella saw fire. Shade pulsed with diagnostic chaos. "Perception loop unstable," it noted. Then came the voice, not external, but within. "You are late, but not too late." The Harrow floated in silence. Lights flickered. No movement, just presence. Lynn spoke. "Why now? Why reveal yourself?" The answer was not in words. It came as pressure in the chest, as a sense of falling upward, as images of stars collapsing, of cities floating, of machines crying out in the dark. Mirelis gripped her seat. "They're not from another world," she breathed. "They're from this one, but a different version." Shade confirmed it. Cross-dimensional resonance patterns, layered timelines, fractured space. The trench was a seam between realities.